China's central bank has stepped in for the first time in 8 months to support a sliding yuan. The People's Bank of China set a stronger than expected trading ban after it plunged to a 7-month low on Monday. But the bank's action helped firm up the yuan on Tuesday, which made its best gains in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Chinese Premier Li says the country still on track to hit its annual growth target of 5%. He also made those comments at the World Economic Forum's annual summer Davos, taking place right now in Tianjin, China. Gao Ang has this.
Calling for better communication and exchanges among international community, enhancing dialogue, bridging differences, and building consensus. This is one of the key messages from Chinese Premier Li Qiang's keynote speech at the Summer Davos Forum.
There are still many global challenges and difficulties before us, such as climate change, slow growth, and the gap between rich and poor. We should cherish the existing cooperation achievements, further establish the concept of win-win cooperation, and join hands to meet global challenges.
Li also said that despite headwinds, the trend of economic globalization has never changed. This year, over 1,500 global leaders from business, government, civil society, and international organizations will be discussing some of the most pressing issues on the global agenda, such as energy transition, financial stability, economic growth, and generative AI.
We firmly oppose the politicization of economic and trade issues, and we must jointly maintain the safety, stability, and smoothness of global industrial and supply chain, so that the fruits of economic globalization can benefit different countries and people in a more equitable manner.
The forum will also discuss key economic indicators and momentum for global growth, prospects of China's economy, the climate crisis, and innovation. This is a critical time for global economic recovery in the post-pandemic era. The Summer Davos Forum says it aims to provide opportunities for in-person dialogue and focus on climate, energy, and technology for China, Asia, and the world. Gao Ang, CGTN, Tianjin.
For more on this, we're joined by Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. Good to see you again, Professor. So here we are. There's been so much expectation that things would get better. We had Antony Blinken go to China. He's come back. Things seem to be getting better, specifically with the U.S.-China relations. Then we had this speech that you just heard part of it. Where are we now?
Yeah, good to talk to you again, Phil. So I think it's clear that the world's economy is not looking great right now. Germany just had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, and the entire European economy is very sluggish. The U.S. economy is also not looking that great, even though with the strong fiscal stimulus, it's avoiding barely recession so far. And China, I think the recovery is on the way, but definitely we want to have a stronger and more solid and balanced growth. So in other words, I think the global economy needs some extra boost. And so this year, the core theme is, entrepreneurship, right? Enterprises to drive the economic, growth and also cooperation. So I think, we definitely need countries and, business leaders and also, civil society and also political leaders to come together and really think about, how we can make the world work better, not just for all these developed countries, but also for developing countries, which a lot of them are still struggle with the pandemic and also debt crises. I mean,
out of fairness, we had those pretty spectacular consumer confidence numbers out of the U.S. They're out of this world. If you think about, there's this fear of recession, Europe's bad, Asia's bad, whatever your narrative is of the world, the United States still stands as a beacon of people who, I suppose for lack of a better word, enjoy spending money and are happy spending money, which ultimately is good for China if they're exporting goods to the rest of the world. So China, I assume, wants the rest of the world to be strong. And yes, I'm singling out the U.S., but why can't Europe step up their game and get their own confidence going? I know we have that situation happening in Ukraine, but that's beginning to get old in the sense that we know about this story. Governments there need to step up their own fiscal stimulus if they need it.
Right, absolutely. I think, for the United States, that fiscal stimulus has been, doing its work to help the economy. But again, we're not out of the woods, so to speak, right? The U.S. Fed simply just skipped one rate hikes, but they did hint it, right, that there were maybe two more down the road. So I don't think, that we're completely sort of on that rosy recovery mode just yet. And for Europe, I think, this war and energy crises still continue to linger on and could have longer term, implications such as deindustrialization and so on and so forth. And they are keeping, hiking the rates as you talked about earlier. So again, I think also with the rate hikes, with all these advanced countries, they definitely took a toll on developing countries, which faced with, triple whammies, right? The capital outflows or capital flights, and then they have the, depreciating currencies against the dollar, and then they have the higher interest payments on their external debts. So as these countries are really struggle to recover from post-pandemic, to rebuild the economy, they're really like having to, reduce their fiscal spending just to come up with the payments to their debtor, to their creditors. So I don't think we're quite out of the woods yet. So I definitely think that better cooperation around the world is very important. I think the IMF has talked about, trade fragmentation is going to shed 7% of the GDP from the world, and tech decoupling is going to shed another 12%.
I remember a time when I was based in Asia, and we did a lot of coverage on China, and one of the big themes for the past decade was China's domestic consumption. In other words, China originally relied on the rest of the world for exports, and that would fund the economy. But lately, China is more self-efficient, right? They do have more domestic consumption internally. They like the rest of the world to be better, but they don't need the rest of the world necessarily to be stronger. And there's been some criticism that the government in China could do more to spur more domestic consumption within the walls of the country. And people often ask me, and I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what more they can do. We just mentioned the People's Bank of China earlier, providing some stimulus. You could argue about spurring real estate, domestic consumption. There's a lot of different ways, but in your opinion, which one should Beijing perhaps focus on? Is there one, two, or three things that they could do right now to help them for the rest of the year?
Right, absolutely. I think you're right that China needs to be more sufficient in terms of demand, but at the same time, I simply don't agree with some of the sort of arguments that when China exported to the world, it's simply sucking away the global demand. Because we all understand China occupies such important nodes in the global supply chain, and China's exports of intermediate goods, technology, and consumer goods are definitely beneficial to the rest of the world in terms of suppressing inflation or helping with production, right, the supply chain. But I do think that, as China grows, as its domestic market expands, China will import more from the rest of the world and help to bolster that demand. But at the same time, I think it is totally true that, don't forget that China's strategy is the double circulation, right, the dual circulation. So it's not just to completely rely on global demand, but also really expand its market, invest more, drive more income and job growth, so then it will have that sustained kind of demand-driven, income growth, that kinds of good cycle.
It is a complicated situation, Professor, as you already know. I'm sure they'll get it right, but in the meantime, we get to sit here and criticize, but it is very, very complicated. Appreciate your analysis on what's happening in Summer Davos and China's strategy going forward.